On behalf of the Stanford School of Public Policy, the Duke Center for International Development and the Duke UNC Rotary Peace Center, I'd like to welcome you all to this first workshop of the semester under our series, Rethinking Development Policy. I'm Francis Letton, former director of the two centers, in which capacity I had the honor and pleasure of meeting tonight's speaker, Steve Killelea, and his associate Aubrey Fox last June at the Rotary Peace Symposium in Sao Paulo. I'm pleased to add that Aubrey Fox is in the audience as well. Steve Killelea and Bill Gates have a lot in common. Both were successful software entrepreneurs, one in Australia and the other in the US, and both decided to become philanthropists. In Steve's case, his interest has been in promoting sustainable development, and in 2000 he established a charitable foundation, one of the largest private overseas aid organizations in Australia. In 2007, he founded the Institute for Economics and Peace, an international think tank dedicated to building a greater understanding of the interconnection between business, peace, and economics, and he launched the Global Peace Index. Tonight, Steve will explain to us what the Global Peace Index is about, as well as how it can be used to identify countries or regions in a country with increasing risks of conflict and thus requiring measures to mitigate such risks. Steve's presentation will be for about 30 to 40 minutes, after which I hope we'll have an animated discussion, but unfortunately not beyond 7 p.m. And please don't forget to switch off your cell phones. Thank you, Steve, for agreeing to be with us tonight.
Thank you, Francis. Can everyone hear me okay? The voice carrier, can you hear me up there? Yeah, okay, great. All right, so I'm going to more or less cover 4 different areas today. What I'll do is I'll cover the Global Peace Index and results, and as this year, 8-year trends. Also going to touch on the economic cost of violence in the global economy. Then I'll move around the concept called positive peace, which is the attitudes, institutions and structures which create peaceful societies. And finally, I'm going to show how the relationship between positive peace, actual peace, as measured by the GPI, can be used for risk analysis. So the Institute for Economics and Peace studies the intersection between business, peace and economics. It places special emphasis on the developing metrics, particularly for the country-based indexes, as well as global indexes. It also ascribes an economic value, changes in peace, and then also works at understanding the factors which create and sustain peaceful societies. So, the Global Peace Index now, it's in its 9th year. We've got 8 years worth of data we can take back. It covers 162 countries. That's about 99.5% of the population of the world. And it rates peace according to its relative states of peace. It uses 23 indicators with a rating of 1 to 5. We've got a tripartite relationship with the development of it. So the Institute for Economics and Peace defines the overall methodology and approaches, such as the definition of peace, which is the absence of violence, fear of violence. The reason we use that is it's a very, very simple definition of peace, which most people can agree to, and most people can actually hold in their head. We then have an expert panel, which actually sets what measures we use, and also the weights of those measures. And then we have a separate group, which is the Economist Intelligence Unit in London, which is part of the Economist Group, which then actually compiles the index. Now, there's a lot of rigour in this because each 3 arms act independently. One arm can always give advice to another arm, but it can't tell you what to do. So let's say when we get the index at the end, it comes out the EIU. We'd review all the indicators, what their scores are, the rankings of the countries. We always have a number of queries which we'll send back to the EIU, and the same with the expert panel. We can't tell them what to do. They can accept or reject what we say. And similarly, it works with the expert panel. So it's quite a rigorous approach to actually developing an index. It's an approach which we've taken as we've adopted country indexes as well and other forms of research. So we look at it, it's broken up into three different domains. The first is ongoing conflict, both international and domestic. The second is societal safety and security. So that measures things like the homicide rate, violent crime rate, the number of people in jail, number of police per 100,000 population, and the level of state-sponsored terror, etc. And the final one is 7 measures of militarisation. So it'd be things like percentage of GDP spent on the military, the number of the percentage of the population which is in the military, sophistication of the weapons, arms exports, arms imports. Now, each of those three domains can be analysed separately. They're quite capable of being pulled out. Similarly, you can take it another way and you can look at internal peace and external peace and cut and dice the global peace index that way. So it gives for pretty good ways of being able to analyse it. So how is 2015? And this is going to be really contradictory to what's in everyone's head. But by the time we get to the end of it, it'll be somewhat more enlightened. So, peace didn't actually go down last year. Now, what we do is we take an approach of taking the average of the 162 countries we measure. Okay? So that's the average of the countries. It didn't go down last year. Very, very different than what you think when reading the headlines in the newspaper. It'll become apparent why that's so as we move a little bit further on. 81 countries became more peaceful. 78 countries became less peaceful. The deteriorations in the last 12 months were mainly deaths from internal conflicts, which we all can see, terrorist activity, which we can see, and the funding of UN peacekeeping. The funding of UN peacekeeping, that's contrary in the last year to the last 8-year trend, and I think probably you've just seen it rather than seeing actually start a new trend today. Countering that, there were improvements in the homicide rate, external conflicts fought. Now those external conflicts fought have been replaced by what's been classified as internal conflicts, like Syria and Iraq now classified as internal conflicts, whereas Iraq would have been classified as an external conflict. So we've seen the shift from external to internal, and now we can all debate what's actually an internal conflict, but we won't have that debate today. Now, the homicide rate over the last 8 years has actually been slightly increasing, so this is sort of against the 8-year trend. Now, Syria, as we've all probably realised, remains the least peaceful country in the world. Iceland, the most peaceful country in the world. In fact, we hosted a cocktail reception at the UN General Assembly, and we had about 60, 80 people there. It was all pretty good. We had the President of Iceland come in, stayed 5 minutes, and came in just to get his photo taken. And that's important, not that he got his photo taken with me, but it shows the self-care being associated with this. Guinea-Bissau, Cote d'Ivoire, he showed the largest improvements. Libya and Ukraine have the largest drops. We look at Guinea-Bissau and Cote d'Ivoire. Quite often after countries have been in conflict, they can have very big increases coming back. They never don't go back, except for a long while, back to the levels of peace which they had. But Guinea-Bissau, it's been slowly improving over a number of years now. Europe's peace improved yet again. And Europe, it's the most peaceful region in the world. No surprises there, is there? Now, the least peaceful region in the world is the Middle East and North Africa. It was South Asia. So South Asia contains Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, and part of it's Sri Lanka sort of settled down. The others haven't changed much. We went back 8 years ago. The Middle East and North Africa was the fourth least peaceful region in the world. So you can see the level of drop which has occurred. Now, that's just a quick mud map of the world. Blue being good. It's got a little thing in the middle. Oh, I better be careful, otherwise it screws up. Okay. So, yeah, so blue being good, red being bad. Now, let's have a look at the 8-year trends. Again, suddenly, in 8 years, over the past 8 years, peace has only deteriorated 2.4%. Not as much as anyone here thinks, is it? Not as much as anyone thinks. Now, two ways of doing it. As I mentioned earlier on, we use a country average. So we take the 162 countries, add the scores together, and then divide by 162. That gives you the average. The other way of doing it is on a personal peace basis. So now what you do is you take the score for each country, multiply it by the citizens in the country, add it all together, then divide by the number of citizens in the world. We don't take that way, otherwise it would be highly dependent on what happens in India and China, and that would determine the outcome of the index. So I think this is a better way of doing it. So safety and security, which was one of the domains we mentioned earlier, about 4%. Now the military's actually improved about 10.5%. That's mainly on the back of reductions in expenditure in GDP on the military. It's a reduction in the percentage of GDP spent on the military. And that's, you can particularly see, it's come up to the global financial crisis in Europe, and you can also see it through Latin America as well. And also a reduction in the number of troops, which goes along with reductions in budgets. Ongoing conflict score, that deteriorated about 1%. You might have think it had deteriorated more, but the thing is it's an average of 162 countries. I'll come to something really quite interesting on that in a while. Deaths from internal conflict and the impact of terrorism had the largest deteriorations. Now, if we look over the 8 years, 76 countries improved, 86 deteriorated. Again, it's not a lot of difference, But there is a concept of growing peace inequality, which I'll come to. Now, greatest deteriorations from the Middle East and North Africa, and Central America and the Caribbean. Central America and the Caribbean, well, that was fueled mainly by increases in violence and homicide rates. And part of that may be back to better ways of counting, because a lot of the time the stars get pretty hard to actually get very clearly. And this is something which always gets lost, the positive news. So Europe is literally at the highest level of peace in its history. We took countries like France, Germany, Italy. We went back 50 years, and the homicide rates are lower now. So we then went back 100 years, and the figures aren't as reliable as we'd like them to be. But again, you can see the homicide rates are now much lower. If you look at the percentage of GDP spent on the military, it's 30 to 40% of what it was in the 50s. So as we can see, we've actually got an historical trend going on here, which most people, even the people who study peace and conflict, are actually oblivious to. Now, we look at the changes. Internal peace has deteriorated. As we go up, it's bad. As we go down, it's good. External peace has increased, but as we mentioned earlier on, a lot of that's related to the shift from being external conflicts to internal conflicts. And you can particularly see that with Iraq, and pull out of the Western military there, and also winding down in Afghanistan a lot of the Western military operations there. Now, this is the movement in the indicators. Refugees and IDP camps have deteriorated, and deaths from internal conflicts and impact from terrorism, the ones which have increased the most. Now, this is just truly staggering. So if we look at compound growth rate of deaths from terrorism over the last 2 years, it's 68%. That's really, really wild. But if we come down to it, 5 countries account for about 74% of those deaths. And if we dig down further, 4 groups account for over 60% of the deaths. So they're the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, and ISIS. Yeah, how could we do that? Gee, glad I've got all of you here. So now if we look at the change in refugees, this is the change in refugees over the last few years. So this place people increased by about 300%, which is actually quite remarkable. Now, this is the inequality in peace. So mentioned earlier on, parts of the world, like Western Europe, are now at historically high levels of peace. But if we go to the 20 countries which are the least peaceful, and we can see here with the dark dots, that's where they were in 2008, with the green dots, that's where they are in 2015. So you can see the 20 least peaceful countries have become a lot less peaceful. And that's what you're getting reflected in the news, just where the issues and problems are. But that's very, very sticky. When you get down to those bottom 20, it's very, very hard to get out. Now, this is an interesting one. So as we did an analysis on the urbanisation and peace, came up with an outcome which was contradictory to what I actually thought. So I always thought the issue urbanisation was associated with increases in violence. How many people here think that? No one. 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. How many think it's associated with peace? No hands. Okay, so we've got 6 people who've got a position, and we've got the rest of the room, which is the somewhere unbalanced. Okay, so we look at the black line running through there. That's the number of people living in rural environments. As we can see, it's changed. We look at the blue lines down the bottom there. That's in the high to moderate peaceful countries. The red is in very, very low countries, and the two in the middle, which is sort of the yellowy stuff, that's the China and India. Now, what we've found is that statistically, increases in urbanisation are associated with increases in peace. Because urbanisation is a byproduct of development. And most urbanised countries in the world are sitting in Western Europe or Australia. So what happens is in the cities, the crime rates are higher than the country, but as you develop, the overall crime rate drops. So as we look deeper into the developing world to find what's actually associated with increases in peace with higher levels of urbanisation, what we found is group grievances. So we've got group grievances within the society with people living in the slums. You find it's also associated with the large levels of inequality in wealth or income, and it's also associated with corruption with the police. So that gives you an idea now of how you may be able to construct urban policies as the urban environments grow to be able to reduce crime. Now, just spend a little bit of time on the cost of violence to the global economy. $14 trillion in 2005. Just to put that into perspective, the global economy, I think, was 84 trillion. That's 13.4% of global GDP. These figures are somewhat light on. I reckon probably 50% under, could be as high as 100%, but I don't think so. So this is truly staggering amounts of money. So if we're able to increase the peace of the world by 10%, we'd free up $1.4 trillion. And give you an idea of just how big that is, that's enough to repay the Greece debt 10 times over. Now, we do this for 162 countries. This is literally the only study in the world which works out the cost of violence to the global economy by aggregating it up from country level. We can do that because we've got the Global Peace Index. It gives us measures. So, but we go down to Thailand, let's say, we haven't got an accurate measure of the cost of a homicide at the same time. But we have in the United States excellent studies here. So we take the average or the mean of those studies, I'm not sure which we use, one or two, average or mean of those studies, and now we can apply it to Thailand by looking at the per capita income of Thailand, which is 80% of the US. So you take the cost of a homicide in the US, multiply it by 0.18, multiply by the number of homicides in Thailand, now you've got a figure of the cost of homicides. And we do that across 15 different dimensions. This now allows for a cost-benefit analysis. So you've really now got a way to be able to look at interventions which you might do in one country compared to another and be able to do a cost-benefit analysis. You've also got the ability to be able to see if you've got increases in violence. You can now, by taking what the costs of that might be, you can take the income, the number of people who are living under $2 a day, the number of people who are living under $5 a day, to an aggregate drop across, and you can work out how many people might be likely to fall below $2 a day. And so there are just a couple of simple ways you can actually use it. So if we go back to 2008, the overall cost of violence in the global economy has increased by 15%. So this is really a calculation of the cost of violence, it's either the prevention, what we spend to prevent ourselves from having violence, or dealing with the consequences of violence when it does occur. So, look at deaths from internal conflicts, we're up about 400%. Losses from IDP and refugees, 267%. UN peacekeeping, 166%. GDP losses from conflict, 150%. Deaths from external conflicts is down, but we know that that's in some ways just a translation. The accountants would say it's a translation. So now, this one I love because this gives us an idea of where it's going. What I want you to have a look at is up in the top corner there, UN peacekeeping. 0.6% what's spent. We come up with the small arms industry. This is stunning. Look at the top there. Little thing. Now that's obviously the legal small arms industry. But why is it such an issue in the States if it's such a small industry? And the military takes up 43%. But if we could count that other 50%, which I think we're missing, because we only count what we can count, the military would come down, so it might drop from, let's say, 43% down to about 30%. But internal security is of interest, and I was surprised how much is actually spent on internal security by countries around the world. It's up in New York for the UN General Assembly, past one of the buildings where President Arnold was having lunch. There have been 1,000 people guarding. Now, we're going to talk about positive peace. Now, this is a concept I think is transformational, and it's a new way of being able to look at development. So it's just a holistic concept of development. So, we define positive peace as the attitude, institutions and structures which create and sustain peaceful societies. So the approach in building this has been totally empirical. And so it's been done through statistical analysis. It's got none of my ideas of what actually peace is. It's got more ethical research. It's simply work towards this. And what we find is when we do this, it sort of reframes the study of peace towards what works, away from studying conflict and what doesn't work. So I'll give you an analogy. So if we study pathology, we've had great breakthroughs in pathology. So no one in this room is going to die young of a heart attack. Many of us, our cancers will even get cured. Study of pathology is really important. It isn't unless you study healthy people. You understand how to stay healthy. Right exercise, good mental position, correct diet. You're not going to learn any of that through studying someone on their deathbed. Similarly, you wanted to have a good marriage. Would you hang around the divorce courts to work out how? Probably not. So, the study of peace really does reframe things differently. And you can see, as I'm just hitting a few different touch points here, you can actually see it. It's also a measure of social resilience. Countries which are strong in positive peace are resilient to shocks. Iceland, for example, the most peaceful country in the world, the country which was worst hit by the global financial crisis, it went bankrupt, absolutely bankrupt. Yet, because of that internal resilience, it could restructure, reframe, and come back, and it's still the most peaceful country in the world. Now, compare that to Greece. It's another low-level, positive peace country, but it's much further down. Now, Japan has got high levels of positive peace too. Look what happened here with the tsunami. Now, compare that to Haiti. It's got very, very low levels of peace, and what happened with the hurricane which went through there. So, now, positive peace in many ways also can create an optimal environment for human potential to flourish. And when we look at the statistical relationships between positive peace, what we find is that countries high in positive peace perform economically much stronger, much better with the business environment, perform better on measures of well-being, better on gender inclusiveness, and also better on the way it performs in terms of ecological management as well. So as we look at it, positive peace reframes the concept of how to go about doing development. Now, how do we arrive at it? So if we look at it, we take actual peace, which is the Global Peace Index. We now do statistical analysis against it, which gives us positive peace. That then gives us the ability to produce a positive peace index. Now, to get this, we've been over 8,500 different data sets, indexes and attitudinal surveys. So what we've got down in Sydney is one of the largest harmonised databases in the world of the global statistics. So we cover things everything from macroeconomics to social relationships to attitudes out of surveys, developmental indicators, social integration, how well governments are functioning and how the country's functioning with external countries as well. So it's really quite a lot. So 99.5% of the population. So we develop the index. It's got 24 different indicators. And there's going to be a topology which I'll show you in a minute. And what we've got is 3 indicators for each of those 8 pieces of the topology which create positive peace. Now, we get there simply by taking what factors have got the highest statistical correlation, providing it doesn't double count some particular factor. And then what we do is we get the weighting is based around the strength of the correlation. And so that determines the weighting. So we don't even actually try and estimate what the weighting is. That's totally derived statistically as well. So this makes it really purely empirical in construction. So it's the only piece of work like it in the world to try and determine what is positive peace through using a totally empirical approach. Now, these are the 8 factors. Well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relationships with neighbouring states, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, sound business environment. So none of these are actually counterintuitive. None. But what happens, and this is the key, it's systemic. Okay, it's systemic. So you've got to look at it as a system rather than think about it in causal effect. And quite often we think about causality, so I can take this, I can throw it up in the air, and it'll always fall at the same speed, 32 feet per second. And that's great because we've done huge things with science through understanding causality, because the physical laws of the universe always perform the same. But now, you 3 ladies, what I produce have the same conversation with all of you, depending on your background, knowledge, what you think of me, and how you're feeling on the day. You get 3 different results. And that, you should put it together into society to create something very, very different. So if you want to think about making change, think about how do you actually create a systemic effect. What's important is not necessarily where the system is, but it's the momentum of the system. So if your slow system's improving, that's what counts, and that's a virtuous cycle. So quite often, as the system improves, and you can see this in Western Europe with the EU, for example, as the system improves, what happens then is it's self-reinforcing on itself, it's moving in the right direction. That's a virtuous cycle. And similarly, you can see in the study of conflict, when it goes the other way, it starts to implode. It goes. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, there's a whole lot of other things which we find are statistically related to this. High GDP, low inflation, more ecologically sound, high levels of human capital, and good performance, and a whole range of human development indicators. So this is a new way of actually looking at development. So that's a mud map of the world again. Dark blue being good, light blue being bad. And this is the 20 countries at the top. Positive peace index. None of it's counterintuitive, is it? And these are the countries at the bottom of the index. Again, you should look at it, you won't see anything which is really counterintuitive there, I don't think. Now, what you can do, you can take the global peace index and the positive peace index and compare the two. So now, positive peace is what we would expect its state of peace to be when you compare the two. So now, what we've noticed over time, countries tend to fall back towards their mean. So in 2008, we looked at the 30 countries which had higher levels of peace than their positive peace indicators said they should have. So the ones with the biggest gap between the theoretical level of peace and actual peace. Now, as we go forward in time to 2015, of those 30 countries, 22 actually dropped in peace, 4 stayed the same, 4 actually increased. So there's a framework for being able to actually do risk analysis and not prediction, risk analysis. It works, and it's as good as anything coming out of the OECD, the World Bank, because a lot of the time we look at fragility. What happens is they've already factored in the risk rather than they're actually looking at where the future risks may lie. Now, most people, when they go about talking about drops in peace, are looking at what's going to fall off the cliff. That seems to be where everyone focuses. But that's not where this is at. This is just looking for changes in peace. And what we consider as the meaningful is a 5% change in peace. So this is much, much more nuanced than most of the frameworks around trying to look at risk analysis. Now, the good news, again, we never hear anything about this, but the good news, from a positive peace perspective, 116 countries actually improved in peace between 2005 and 2015, compared to just 33 which fell. Now, a lot of those ones which fell, some of them are only small, but a lot of them were in Western Europe and the United States. 2 areas where they fell, this is true in the United States as well, is the perception of corruption. So we never know real corruption, we just know can measure its perception. So it's the perception of corruption and freedom of the press. And then freedom of the press is mainly around concentration of ownership. As mentioned, it's measured by Freedom House. Now, this is a diagram I like. It's a little bit like a spaghetti bowl, I guess. But the thing which is key, it's looking down here. This is the changes in peace over time. And you'll see that the countries which are high in positive peace and high in actual peace have little change compared to the countries which are further down and lower on positive peace and lower in good peace. And that's back to the concept of resilience. That's another way of being able to come back and see resilience. It's reflected in the human history. Also, if you look at positive peace, it correlates quite moderately or quite strongly with achievements of the Millennium Development Goals as well. So this is just taking the countries which were the focus of the Millennium Development Goals were. Now, we come back, we now look at resistance movements over time. Countries which are strong in positive peace have less resistance movements. They're a lot less likely to become violent. They exist for a smaller amount of time, more moderate in their aims, more likely to achieve their aims. So again, this is another way of coming back and validating positive peace back into the actual world and its impact. Now, this is Myanmar. It's a country I've spent a bit of time in lately. I've spent a lot of time in over the last 20 years. And this is just a simple way you can use it. So you can look at the changes in the 8 factors which create positive peace. Compare Myanmar to the global average. So it gives you an idea of where you've got the most positive momentum. Now, what does all this mean? If you can measure and analyse peace, you can understand the factors which create peace. If you can measure and analyse peace, you can understand what the economic cost of changes in peace. This is all actionable. It gives you the ability to get better prediction, better cost analysis methods, and better programs and outcomes. That, my friends, and these are our other products I've just really spoken about one today. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope you like it.
As usual, we hope to get many questions. I know that it's always difficult to get started.
Oh, it wasn't. I answered
There's Fernando too, I see others, so it's okay. Fernando, would you like to go first?
Oh, look, I'll just excuse myself and get control. I think I'll be back in about 3/4 of an hour.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You're messing with me. I'm actually one of those people who could be messed with, so I'm so sorry. All right.
I've just got a really naughty sense of humor.
Gathering, thank God it dawned on me. Thank you for your talk and your sense of humor. And I actually really appreciate it. I've spent a lot of time, many of my students have actually used your model as an example for an assignment in my class of a creatively changing it up organization. So I spent some time thinking about it because of that.
Okay.
And I haven't understood it all, so I'm really, really grateful for you explaining it some more. There's one thing I was particularly interested in understanding, which was when you were talking about, and might not have gotten it all, so I just really needed clarification, honestly. So I think what you said was the way that you understand about the costs and the benefits associated with peace is you look at the GDP of a country, and then you divide it over the number of individuals. And then you use the United States as the index for like a country like Thailand where you don't have the information. So if Thailand's GDP is 80% of the United States, then you just assume the American model and put it on the Thai story, right? Is that right?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, so make sure I get this, because I don't think I fully do. And then the second thing is, like, why did you do that, and how much pushback have you gotten from other people about the idea of using the United States as the index for the benefit
Okay. So what I used is the homicides, because there's some the US has got some excellent studies on that, probably the best in the world. So that study comes out of the US. So other studies might come from somewhere else. So the fear of violence, costs associated with that, we get that from a Canadian study, and other studies come out of other parts. So we're counting the military. There's independent databases which have been built by people like IISS or CIPRI around the various components of the military. So they've got all that work done. So we take that and use that. But we'll pick that example. Violent crime would be another one. Just pick that as an example, standing here in America.
Right.
Now, what happens, the way it works is, I'll go through it again.
So violent crime.
Sorry?
You're going to do it on violent crime right now.
Homicides, right?
Okay.
Homicides.
Yeah.
Homicides is a good example. So basically, the way you actually count the cost of a homicide, it basically works something like this. So it's about 40 times the cost of about 40 times the cost of lost income. Because most people who die usually in their early 20s. You assume you've got 40 years of working life, you multiply it by capita income, then there's a flow-through factor because of that lost level of income in society. And there's also some other factors which are associated with loss and grieving with the families. And then there's other factors which you can do in economic terms, which is related back to income. So that's the only way you can really do it. And then there's the physical costs, which would be the, let's say, the cost of a police investigation, cost of hospitalisation, cost of funerals. So now, what we assume is that there's a relationship there, and it's pretty good assumption. There's back, which is the per capita income relationship now. Thailand has got 18% of the per capita income of the US. We will take the cost of that, multiply it by 0.18, which is equivalent to 18%, multiplied by the number of homicides in Thailand. So for that particular indicator, okay? And other indicators are done differently, but it's just giving you an idea of what.
Did anybody say, there's two kinds of critiques, right? So the one critique would be that if you have a bunch of homeless people who don't have any kind of income, that kind of way of valuing people's lives doesn't really value their lives. Now, you might say we don't have any other way to do it, right? But if you have a large number of poor people who do not have much of an income on which to do it, you're going to have problems counting them, right? And that's one concern I'd have. And the second concern I'd have is, how does Thailand feel about being understood as being functionally the same, right? The way that we would understand the cost of a Thai person dying is the same as how you would understand an American person dying.
Never had any pushback in Thailand.
Okay.
I've given this presentation a couple of times in Thailand,
Yeah.
so I've never had any pushback on that. What we do is we take the mean wage, okay, so that's sort of in theory, and you can put up a strong argument that maybe poor people get murdered more than rich people, which is probably pretty true. So we take the mean income, and then what we do is we also take a factoring in by the unemployment rate as well. Okay? So we take those two factors in and actually come back with the number. And it's perfect. I wouldn't argue it's perfect. Better model.
I understand. How do you do the counting? I get that.
Yeah. So we're always looking at ways of improving this stuff, and it's on each year we come back to it. And I can see this year we've improved the methodology from last year in a number of different ways, particularly in terms of counting refugees and IDPs. So we used to just take the UNHCR figures. Now what we do is we disaggregate it down by country. What we do then is we look at the number of refugees. We again multiply it by the per capita income, and again multiply it by the unemployment rate.
Let me try a fellow, and then I'll go back to a faculty. Go ahead. Yes?
Hi, I'm Preeti, a student of the International Development Program. Thank you for explaining to us the cost-benefit ratio analysis to peace. I think it's really cool. But I wanted to ask you, in the time of limited resources, if you had to choose between projects which had similar benefit to cost ratio and similar NPV ratios, how would you attach an ethical element towards selecting projects to fund or not?
So for us, we're producing the research, so we're a research organisation, not a implementation organisation. We'd leave there, so you need situational intelligence to be able to understand what is the right decisions, and obviously you always want to have some ethical considerations in what you do, rather than just being actually driven by dollars and cents. If you're totally driven by dollars and cents, you get quite a different outcome. But I think it's always important to use the dollars and cents as part of making that decision. Okay, otherwise, you can end up doing things which are really stupid and discussed ethically based on.
One comment, I still was going along the idea that this estimate of the cost of violence seems to be excessively high in relation to the world economy. And the big question is probably there is a certain degree of violence that we've been living with, and it's a change that we need to consider when we look at some of these policies. So I would probably need to understand better how you get at this 14 trillion level of calculation. But my second question is in relation to your correlations. Let's look at the United States. The United States in some of your rankings doesn't do as well. It's not among the top.
So it's a bit what we call a mid-ranking.
And yet, the United States in competitiveness, in innovation, in many other aspects, does extremely well. So how do you explain that?
Sure, yeah. So there's a couple of outliers in the positive peace model because the US performs pretty well in the positive peace model. So it's about 20, something like that, I think. So it's pretty good. So there's two outliers. The two biggest outliers when you look at this, the USA and Israel.
Outliers.
In terms of their actual peace compared to their positive peace. And so the two of the countries, Mexico's another one, which have got, they should, in theory, have the largest potential to increase their peace. So now, if you look at the US and why is it low, it's probably somewhat different than what you think. So as a percentage of your GDP, your military is a percentage of GDP, it's about 4%. Really big countries, people like Northern Korea and Syria, about 20%. So that doesn't push you right down. It does a little bit, it doesn't push you right down. So it's nowhere near as low as, let's say, Western European nations. But you do have the largest number of the percentage of your population in the world in jail. Okay, so that pushes you right down. A very high availability of the small arms, maybe not small arms, military grade arms, out in the common population. You've also still got Guantanamo Bay, so if we're now looking at the Amnesty International Human Rights groups, they would see that as giving you a mid-ranking score on a political terror scale. So they're some of the factors which pull you down. You've been involved in a number of wars, okay, and big nations tend to be less peaceful than small nations. A couple of reasons. One is being able to try and hold those kind of diverse ethnic groups together. The other is big nations tend to throw their weight around for strategic reasons. So now, if we look at that and we start to unpack that a little bit, get rid of Guantanamo Bay, that's a political deadlock more than it's a security safety issue. You are starting to address the number of people in jail. I noticed there's a group of bipartisan senators which have come together to now push for lower jail sentences for non-violent crimes. America is starting to wake up to that one over time. Guns may be good, but I don't understand guns in America. It's the only place in the world which actually thinks that way. It's good to have assault rifles. So,
okay. Can I move back to a fellow's question?
I have kind of like two questions. So I know this is like an excellent tool in terms of determining what are the level of peace in a particular year. How can you use this to actually predict conflict trends for the future, or is there like kind of like a mechanism in it which you can actually then build on to see what are the future trends going to be? And my second question is, how do you measure, for example, indirect causes? For example, if there are IDPs crossing borders, so would you calculate their, would you count them in the country that they're, migrating to, and then calculate it based on that country's, dynamics, or also in terms of, the loss that the country they're migrated for?
We run with the UNHCR's figures, so what they do is they'll count the internally displaced people in countries. Then they'll also look at refugees in other countries. Most of it, I think about 2/3 is the internally displaced. Now, when you hit the other countries, we haven't got the ethnic breakdown of where the refugees come from. Therefore, we have to do the calculation based on the country they're in. What's the first question again?
And actually, just one other thing to this part. So, like for example, also in terms of military arms trade. So, shouldn't you also include that in this? For example, a lot of countries that are developed countries, they are involved in military arms trade.
We count it.
So
we count weapons exports.
Yeah. So would that then count into the exporting country or the importing country?
As a part.
Oh, okay, both. Okay. And my first question was.
It's a lost cost of both countries.
Okay.
So the reason you calculate that So now, let's say it's the US, you're producing tanks, okay? So if you're producing tanks, so you've not actually got much flow-on benefit from it. And the best you can use that to not use the tank. And now, receiving country gets the tank, and again, like it's lost productivity to the global economy, isn't it, on both sides? So that's the basis behind it.
The first question related
And first was, how do you
Forecasting.
use this to forecast?
Okay, so
Conflict grants.
I put up there what we call a positive peace deficit model. So we've got a number of different ways of forecasting. So we don't do prediction. We absolutely stay right away from the word prediction. So now, if you can predict something, please pull out your crystal ball and put on a turban and I'll sit down with you. So now, however, we will do probability analysis. So what I gave there is one of the different mechanisms we've got for doing the analysis. So other ways you can do this analysis also is a like country model. That's another one. And there's another model which you can use for different types of violence, which you've got different aspects which will actually predict the violence. So what you use to predict the likelihood of terrorism, or the probability of terrorism, is very, very different than what you do for, let's say, just the overall piece. I won't go into the different models now, but we've got a number of different models which you can take into different angles.
One more question behind you. Yes.
It's amazing how she asked the exact same question.
So you two are obviously in the same study group. You're looking over a shoulder.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Maybe it's a similar question, but I think it's quite interesting to look at the different indicators that you mentioned, and many of them are related to the perceptions of safety and peace from the people. And I think because the perception of peace is also I think, depends much on the people inside the country perception of this issue. So how many people do you include those countries those people inside the country, their perception on peace, security?
Yeah, we've got one measure there which is fear of violence, and that's picked up from one of the Gallup World Trials. So that's the technique there. So that's the measure we've got for that. The others we use sort of physical things like so things like violent crime and homicide, I think are a pretty good proxy for fear. Now, also, if you're looking at state-sponsored terror, so that looks at the gross human rights abuses like extrajudicial killings, tortures, the imprisonment without trial. Okay? So if you look at that, that gives you, that's the way to go.
Thank you. I might have missed from the slides you went through whether or not you did this, but did you look at ever income inequality and there was a correlation with that?
Yes.
And then my second one is, did you ever look at things such as, think of things that can cause conflict is availability of access to water, for example, clean water, and so whether or not there's measures you can look at access to those kind of things and see if that's something.
Yeah. So if we look at those 8,700 indicators we've included there. You've got to understand this presentation is done at a really high level. So I didn't even put up the 24 indicators we've got measures. So the HDI inequality adjusted measure, that's got highly significant statistically. That's one of the measures used in the positive peace index. And that'll be around equitable distribution of resources. When we look at ecological factors, that just isn't statistically correlated at this stage. Now, some stage further on when we get enough water wars, if the water wars to occur, okay, then they'll probably fall into statistically being significant. At this stage, it's not. And that may be because we just haven't had enough of them. And sort of the debates I've had up in the UN over the last couple of days is they're now starting to get a lot of people in the climate change debate starting to now say, well, the climate's going to lead to conflict and creating it. A lot of it is sort of opinion rather than it's based on fact. That we all can come back to some situations where water has led to conflict. We're not saying it's not, we're just saying country level, statistically, overall, those databases that aren't statistically significant.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yes, go ahead first.
Yeah. Can you, using your probability abilities, are you able to, not your fortune telling, but
Probability squidgy.
yeah, are you able to like give any sort of indication of the direction of the impact the refugee crisis in Europe has at the moment on this? You know, you've said the highest levels of peace in Europe at the moment.
So actually, I'll tell you what was fascinating. Okay, I'll give you a story. So I think it was about 2 weeks ago, I was in Munich and I gave the keynote address at the conference there on the refugees and the German immigration policy. Okay? And so that was lined up 4 months ago, and so as the crisis just came up as we got there. So why they've asked me to speak on that, because I'm Australian, not an expert in refugees, know nothing about German policy, but they did. Now, if you look at the response, which has happened a week ago in Germany, in the EU, first time I've seen it. It's 24 nations which comprise the EU. What they did is they overruled 4 of them in terms of the refugee settlement policy. And that for them was absolutely strategic. Is the whole basis of the EU is based on free movement. So it's starting to put up borders, okay, to stop free movement through the EU. That affects the very basis of the economic integration of Europe. So it's the flow of free goods. If it's going into borders which are now protected, you start to slow it down. So they really reacted on it. So what you're seeing there is a positive response. Now, so what do you do when you don't know much about something? Okay, the idea is you just think simply. Okay, just think simply. So my mind and pretty much the way this conference finished up. So this conference had a lot of German MPs there, a lot of policy makers around the refugee issues and security issues. So it's pretty interesting. So at the end of it, basically it's not seen as being too big a problem. So it goes something like this. This is the way I opened it up. So if you look at Australia, okay, Australia takes in 1% of its population every year in terms of immigration. It's been doing that for 60 years. But admittedly, it's an orderly process. And we select who we come. It's got the largest diversity anywhere in the world. 24% of Australians were born in another country. And if you cover those countries, you'd be up to something like about 160. It's truly amazing. So Australia can take in 1% a year very, very comfortably without any loss of social cohesion. Now, if we look at Germany, 800,000 people registered as refugees this year. Well, that's what they're expecting. Germany's 81 million people. So it's about 1% of the population, and it's just 1 year. It's not 60 years. Right. Now, we then go back to 1994 and find the Balkans wars. What happened is they had 400,000 people arrive in 1 year. And they very much were able to cope with that. So they've got a model which they know how to do. At that stage, it was shortly after the integration of East Germany. So that was the country was a lot poorer with a lot less resources. So it's got more resources to actually deal with the problem today. Now, if we come back now and we start to look at the mix of those people coming in as refugees, 51% of them are kids. The genders are pretty much balanced 50-50. But if we look at people over 60, it's only 3%. Now, if you go to Germany today, 28% of the population is over 60. And that points to a demographic crisis which Germany is going to have. So now, a lot of these people coming in are fairly well skilled, better educated. And the reason for that is they have money. Okay? So if you want to get across there, you're going through some very dangerous territory. You've got to pay bribes all along the way, so you need money to do it. If you haven't got money, you don't go anywhere. So therefore, they're better educated once they come in. So that sort of corrects, in some ways, the demographic deficit in Germany. Now, also, if we come back 90% of refugees tend to go back to the country they came from when the conflict stops, because it's a more comfortable and easier place to live. Now, that does change if the refugees for a long while, and their kids start to grow up in another culture, and then they're less likely to leave. Now, if we come back to the EU as a whole, 580 million people. Now, if you take 0.5% of that, that's 3 million people. It's easily enough to break the back of the refugee problem. Simple.
It's always nice to quantify things. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I have two quick questions. Can you talk about a little bit the impact and role of institutions and policies in keeping and increasing the peacefulness? Because you talked a bit about Europe and institutions there are really important, and also possible applications of these numbers and
Sure, if I moved to time to give the presentation, I should do it backwards, might be a bit of fun, eh?
Yeah.
Break it up. Okay, so we'll come back to this. So if we look at it, we use what we're looking at is the systemic effect, okay? So institutions, they play into attitudes, societal attitudes play into institutions, and then you've got formal and informal structures within societies. Like it's just like whether you queue or you don't queue, that's an informal structure, if you like, within society. So what's important is to think of it systemically. It's very, very hard to understand the interplay. And I'll give you an example. So let's look at the relationship between, let's say, low level, between corruption, free flow of information, which is epitomised by a free press, and well-functioning government. So which one influences the other, let alone the effects of business? So if you come down and you look at business, it concentrates in the press. Okay, that comes in that, and those same people tied up with the illegal, illicit activities. The effect they might have back on government. Now, if you push back on government, you get a change in maybe government because the attitudes of the people elect the leader who's a little bit more transformational, maybe one every 15 to 20 years. They then put in anti-corruption processes, which now come back and affect the function of government and affect the function of business. Similarly, you've got laws in place for the media as well. As the media gets more concentrated, gets more control and power, before it comes back and now it influences the business environment in all sorts of different ways, and comes back and makes impacts on the attitudes of society. So it gets very deep, pulling it all apart. You really need a lot of situational intelligence to understand it. So the views we've got is you've got to look at it systemically, and it's how can you actually stimulate all the different things at a time. Now, what's important is what you can actually do within a society. So like in Zimbabwe, for example, you wanted to go in and get the lower levels of corruption. By trying to decide to tackle the corruption within the diamond trade, you wouldn't get anywhere because of Mugabe's ownership of diamond mines. But you might get somewhere if you turned it into a tax take issue, okay? Because all governments want more money. So then what are the processes and mechanisms through which you improve the tax take, and that actually improves transparency. Does that help?
Should I also need to go to Professor Graham?
No.
Oh, you didn't have. Okay, then I had. Fine, you back.
I have been very lucky because my questions have been answered before I could ask them, because I was going to ask about heterogeneity and diversity of cultures having any correlation with the level of peace, and I think you've already gone over that.
Gross group grievances. Okay, that's the big thing we're looking for. Certainly, if you get more diverse cultures, they are harder to hold together. No doubt about that. The things which correlate strongly are the gross group grievances rather than the diversity. So.
Also, I had another question. It's almost like a query. I want to clarify it. It's so when calculations were made in terms of security, in the indicators for security and numbers of refugees were counted in, was there any distinction made between refugees and economic migrants, or?
We take, yes, there is. So we take so what we do is we take the UNHCR's figures on the internally displaced people, refugees, economic migrants generally are people who migrate illegally. You do get some migrating illegally, but not a real lot. Most of the people who are migrating these days, and the big increases, are really sort of escaping conflict. So if you look into Syria, I think it's last time they did a referendum, the census, there was about, I think population was 22 million. Estimates today are somewhere between 9 and 13 million people displaced.
Yes, I have just one question. It's also related to refugee figures, refugees and IDPs. And you, I think, briefly mentioned about the Haiti and Japan earthquake. And I'm wondering if you considered this kind of a natural disaster or climate change induced natural disaster. Because if we think about all those figures of refugees and IDPs, sometimes these figures are coming from kind of natural disasters. For example, in sub-Saharan African countries, there are a lot of refugees because of kind of frequent droughts in Eastern African countries. So all those figures are very much, figures are coming from natural disasters. So this natural disaster also affects kind of, natural disaster also affects kind of positive piece. So I'm wondering if you think about these kind of things.
Yeah, so let's take the environmental factors as we did statistically associations. They weren't statistically significant. Now certainly there are cases where you're getting people migrating for whole reasons around say ecological issues, but there's a lot of other factors which are driving immigration in Africa in particular. And so a lot of that comes back as lack of jobs. Overpopulation in these areas means that what was a viable farm, as you split it up between your family, becomes unviable. I've seen that as a classic example many times in Africa. So it's a whole lot of drivers for the immigration, and it's very hard to actually pull that apart. That's not to say it doesn't occur, okay? It's just that it's not necessarily statistically significant. That may change. That may change.
Because natural disaster also affects the whole economy, those societies, and also even GDP.
Sure. Yeah. No. Totally agree with you. Looking into a lot of the African countries which are stressed climate, like Kenya is one I know very well. The drivers of the movement in the city, particularly drivers of refugees, we've got an awful lot coming out of Somalia, escaping the violence up there. They're certainly not economic immigrants. And then you've also got overpopulation in a lot of the richer farming belts, because a lot of the customs, sort of when your children become of age, you give them part of your family plot. But now, as they see with the booming life expectancies and the lowering mortality rates, farms are becoming unviable as you start to cut them down under a couple of acres. And so that then causes a whole lot of migration to the city, as well as there's just not being any employment. So all those factors are there.
Yeah, does the Institute invest in any sort of research mechanism to increase the accuracy, specifically with regard to valuation? Like kind of what Adme was saying, how you superimpose the cost or the valuation of the United States?
We're always looking at ways of being able to improve it. See, one of the things you've got to understand that stuff's really hard to measure. So you can work with the best data you've got, but that's all you can do. The construction of the index takes into account trying to balance different domains and different stats. So where you've got stuff which is fuzzy, you might have something else which gives you a better indicator. So we'll look at relationship between homicides and violent crime. So violent crimes are more estimated through experts' views, and we use the Commerce Intelligence Unit to do that. They've got pretty good indicators on that. Whereas we use UNODC figures for the calculation of homicides.
Looking at the trends of conflict, how it has been shifting from international conflicts or external conflict to internal conflict, do you think the methodology or some indicators might change over time to better capture this?
I think, I think there's enough data there to capture it. I think we're using databases out of IISS, so they've supposedly got the best databases on measuring conflict. So their definition of conflict is greater than 25 battlefield deaths. So what is a conflict? Okay, just what is a conflict? Typically low level, if you bump above 25 deaths, then you fall below for 2 years, and you back above 25 deaths. So conflicts can come in and out. So what we use is a scale weighing factor going back 5 years. So it's this year it counts for a year. So conflicts exist. You've got to have disappeared for 5 years before we take it off the books. Now, being able to determine an internal conflict versus an external conflict. So an external conflict, what that really does is you've got accounting on both sides of the ledger, if you like. So you've got a lot of stuff happening in a country like Iraq. Let's say there's a lot of Western European involvement and American involvement. Okay, so if you pull back, now you've got power back, you can say you get all the internal actors in conflict. Now you've certainly got that overlay with a lot of proxy wars going on. You haven't actually got a whole lot of troops there now. I imagine this now is coming around and starting to bomb Syria. That'll now come around and get counted as a conflict.
Now, you have
But
been...
that'll be dependent on the greater than 25 deaths.
You have been investing considerable financial investment in developing that index. And how do you hope that people may be using it? What has been your ideal and your vision for what you want to achieve through it?
Okay, so well, really at this stage it's achieved more than what I ever imagined it would. So the last launch we did the Global Peace Index, and this is literally no exaggeration, was there's the 1.5 billion people was the media reach. Okay, so that's people who either seen it on TV, listened to it on the radio, or read about it in the newspaper. That's excluding blogs. That's just news articles. So news and media articles. So that on its own is actually publicising the concept of peace. That on its own is just making people more knowledgeable about peace, and I'll be okay with that on its own. Our work's used by all the major multilateral organisations. So we talk regularly, the OECD, UN, World Bank, even NATO, Ministry of Defence in the UK. They all use some parts of it, and regularly as well. We did contract research, so now sort of we're doing work for the UN, the OECD, Commonwealth Secretariat, and a whole range of others as well. So now that gets the work more ingrained in its work. And it works literally with thousands of the university courses around the world. The thing about it being taught in thousands of university courses around the world won't have much impact at this stage. The students learn about new concepts and ways of thinking. 15 years later, they start to get into positions of influence, and that's where then what they do is they bring knowledge which they got out of university and then apply it into those positions. And then as they move further up, they're more likely to see further change. Generally, the last people to make change or to accept new things as politicians. And that's simply because they're driven by public perception. So as things perceptions change, they change. And similarly, if you're looking at business leaders, most business leaders, if they're going to look at peace in an economic model, need to have it being taught to them in an MBA program somewhere. Because generally, they're going to work rigorously on frameworks which they're taught, quite rightly so. Maybe some of these here.
I have a follow-up question to that one. If there's any more spaces there?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Teamwork.
Okay, thank you. So my colleague Francis is always very interested in sustainability of big visions, right? So I'm actually really curious, this is not something I can find on your website. Like, how much money do you have to spend in order to have these panels of experts do the like really workhorse work that makes what you have valuable? And how do you assure that there will be a supply of money to take care of this, you know, for the next 50 years, so that this peace index goes on? Do you do this by having contracts with the UN, which doesn't have a lot of money to give you? Or how are you setting up a trust fund to be able to pay for your economists going forward?
That's fine. It's probably a lot cheaper than what you think, okay? I'll tell you that now. The expert panel which provides all the weighting, that's all done pro bono. So obviously we developed about 5 of the indicators now ourselves, so that's done in-house. I'm not going to go through exactly the amount of money, but it's a lot less than what you're thinking. That's basically so they do a good contract, and in terms of the PRs, just as much as what it costs to produce the index. Okay, the PR around the launches, generally for really big launches, about the same. And why is that? Because you can't see any point in doing something and sitting on it. Okay, and the best way to get it out, and get people paying attention, is when they read about it in the newspaper, or they see a marketing material coming from us which uses concepts of reference selling. Okay? I've used some concepts of reference selling in here tonight. As for the money is fine. I'm not going to go into the personal financial situation. But like the things have been set up so it's certainly sustainable for at least the next decade, with or without me.
That's our last question.
After this great explanation, I want to know what's your vision. So in 10 years, in 20 years, how do you imagine both the peace index and the world with this instrument?
Okay, so let's go just simply. Okay, I'll give it a twofold answer. One is if you can't measure something, how can you understand it? Can't. Okay? So if you can't measure something, you don't know whether your actions are helping or hindering you from meeting your goals. So in the whole area of peace, what I'd like to see is much more quantification of what peace is and what the impacts of peace. So there's movements in that way, but a lot of it's still sort of Mickey Mouse. The other thing is my encapsulated vision is it's a bit like the positive psychology movement. It's 20, maybe 30 years old now. So it's new. We've only really recently started to actually think about what is the positive and how can we replicate that. And that's the transformational concept of positive peace. So that's the first thing that's systemic. And it's that what we do at some point in the future, when we think of things, we view it as systems, we view what's positive, replicating what works, so we get the sustainability, so we don't have to even think about rectifying the country.
I must say that I'm simply amazed at how you have been handling what looked like, it felt like a PhD test by the whole assembly.
So, do I get my honorary PhD?